There's a certain kind of restaurant that isn't really about the food. It's about the deal. Walk in, pay less than $5, and eat until you physically can't anymore. That was CiCi's Pizza for almost 4 decades, and at one point, it was one of the fastest-growing pizza chains in the entire country. Today, more than half of those locations are gone. Not from one big scandal, not from one bad year. This is a slower story, and honestly, a stranger one than most people realize. Let's get into what actually happened. CiCi's started in 1985 in Plano, Texas, and the person behind it wasn't who you'd expect. Joe Croce had an accounting degree, not a culinary one. He wasn't dreaming about pizza his whole life. He just wasn't satisfied crunching numbers for someone else. What's easy to forget is that the first CiCi's location wasn't even a buffet. It was a small takeout-only pizza shop with no seating at all. The buffet idea came a couple years later, at a second location, almost as an experiment. That experiment is what turned CiCi's into a company. Within 2 decades, it had exploded across the South and Midwest, hitting its peak in 2009, with around 650 restaurants in 33 states. For a company built on one of the simplest ideas in the restaurant industry, that kind of growth felt unstoppable. Except the same idea that made CiCi's grow so fast also made it fragile in a way nobody saw coming for 35 years. Here's the number that explains almost everything. Some industry estimates put CiCi's dine-in revenue at close to 86% of its total business. That's not unusual for a buffet. It's the entire point of a buffet. But it also means CiCi's had built almost no safety net outside of people sitting down inside the restaurant. You can't hand someone an unlimited buffet through a drive-through window. You can't put it in a delivery bag. For most of its history, that wasn't a problem worth solving. Then March of 2020 arrived, and every restaurant in America that depended on people walking through the front door got hit at the same time, all at once, with no warning. The financial damage was almost immediate. CiCi's brought in roughly $177 million in revenue in 2019. The following year, that number fell to around $76 million, a drop of well over half in 12 months. By January 2021, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, carrying more than $80 million in debt. And this is usually where these stories end. But CiCi's actually came back surprisingly fast, emerging from bankruptcy in less than 2 months under a new ownership group who believed the model still worked, just at a smaller footprint. Locations dropped from around 420 to roughly 270, and the brand kept going. But there's a second thread running underneath all of this that gets ignored almost every time this story gets told, and it might matter just as much as the pandemic did. In the 20 years before COVID even hit, CiCi's had already changed ownership 4 separate times. A management buyout in 2003, after founder Joe Croce stepped back and, according to reports, donated 1/5 of what he earned to his church. Then a sale to a private equity group in 2007. Then another sale to a different investment firm less than 10 years later. Each new owner brought new priorities, new debt, and a little less understanding of what made CiCi's work in the first place. By the time the pandemic hit, the company wasn't just vulnerable because of its business model. It was being run by people several steps removed from the original idea. And then there's the part of this story that's barely a few months old. The 2 investors who bought CiCi's out of bankruptcy back in 2021 weren't outside buyers. They were cousins who had actually lived in the same house as teenagers before going into business separately. Together, they were supposed to be the ones who finally stabilized the brand for good. Instead, in 2024, one filed a lawsuit against the other, claiming tens of millions of dollars in profits had been diverted into a company his own cousin controlled. In 2025, a Texas jury agreed, awarding a judgment reported at around $46 million. The 2 people who saved CiCi's from bankruptcy ended up fighting each other in court over what was left of it. So when you put it all together, CiCi's decline isn't really one story. It's 3 stacked on top of each other. A business model that couldn't survive a pandemic, 2 decades of ownership changes that slowly hollowed the brand out, and now, a legal battle between the very people who were supposed to be protecting it. CiCi's is still around, still cheap, still unlimited, still recognizable if you walked into one today. But getting back to 650 locations feels like a very different challenge than the one Joe Croce solved back in 1985. Did you grow up going to CiCi's? Is there still one open where you live, or did yours disappear a while ago? And do you think the buffet model can actually make a comeback, or is this just how it ends for chains built around it? Let me know down in the comments.